The MenScape podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.
Welcome, everybody, to the September edition of the MenScape podcast, sponsored by Right Coach Ireland and helping people to share and tell the story of their own journey with the one and only Mr. Charlie McCready. How are you doing, Charlie?
I'm doing wonderfully, Carl, and thank you so much for this opportunity to join you today.
I think we've been joined by Tippy as well.
Oh, yeah, I did see something fairy and
Here,
small
Tippy,
rustling away in the background.
three of us, the magic divine trinity. Won't you tell us
Perfect.
who are you and what do you do?
So I am a parental alienation coach. And for those people who don't know what that is, it's basically where a pet, typically after a high conflict separation, one parent decides to deny access to the other parent of the children and effectively manipulates and coerces those children so they won't see that parent. And it's a harrowing experience for anybody going through it. I've been through it personally, and I'm now helping people to fast track their own healing process and being able to reconnect with their children far more effectively.
That sounds like a very difficult job, Charlie.
It's Actually, it's a wonderful job to do. It's very, having been through it personally, I know exactly what this experience is like for other people.
Yeah.
And it gives me enormous satisfaction to be able to help people to get through this in such a better way because they all need support. They all don't understand alienation, how it works, the counterintuitive nature of it. They're all hurt people within themselves, as in the parents who've been targeted, who are not having access to their kids. And it's so nice to be able to see these people kind of regaining their life again and being able to kind of feel good about themselves and having the tools to then start rebuilding the relationships with their kids. Just understanding the subtle but important ways which they can do, which in how they can do that because these are desperate people, as in the desperate parents, that they're in a real state.
Mhm.
And even in a short period of time, you just see these people starting to blossom again, and it's beautiful to watch.
So, where are you from? Where did you grow up, and how on earth do you get into the job of realizing that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and that your sole mission is to help and support other people?
So I was born in London, but I've then I left when I was 10, and I spent 20 years out in different countries, including 12 years in Ireland, which of course is a very spiritual place. But I always knew when I was very, very young that
Hmm.
at a point in time in my life, in kind of my mid 50s, that I would be moving into doing something far more spiritual. And as I approached that time, I was more and more restless with the idea of staying in a conventional job, doing conventional things. And I was very fortunate because the people I was working with leading up to that point in time were just so awful that I couldn't stand it. And
They made that decision a bit easier for you.
yeah, they kind of gifted me the determination to resign and just leave it all behind. And so I did.
Hmm.
And so myself and with my beautiful wife Emma, and I thank her for having the courage to come on this journey together. We just threw it all in. We had no idea how we were going to get by. And then we just had this idea of, in fact, it was Emma's idea. She said, We've both been through this experience of parental alienation. Um, why don't we go heal people?" And so we've been doing that ever since. So we set up on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and started on a journey of sharing our insights. And then I created an approach, which I call the 9-step program.
Okay.
It's kind of it underpins all of the work I do in coaching as well. But it's all very spiritually connected ultimately. because we are, as you say, we're spirits having a human experience. Um, and all this stuff about alienation is just part of that journey. And it's one that teaches us enormously about ourselves.
Right.
Fast tracks it's like a fast track process to really get to know yourself a lot better and to heal you on so many different levels.
So you could almost say it wasn't that you fell into it, it was that you were born to do this.
Yeah. And there's more for me to do outside of alienation. So I have another mission which I'm working on at the moment. So I'll talk about that when it's a little bit more developed because I think it's bad
Sure.
luck to talk about some of these things when it's too early on. But yeah, so there's a lot
Great
more
wisdom in that.
waiting for me
Yeah.
in terms of to be
And
done.
so if you were God, the greatest way to train someone up into being able to help others go through this kind of horrific psychological kind of abuse
Mm,
is obviously to put you through it.
absolutely. You don't understand it until you've done it. Yeah.
And you can't go to school and learn about this. No disrespect to anyone that does counseling or therapy courses in
Mm.
university or college, but it's the lived experience that you're bringing to the table. And so there's no degree or course can teach you about suffering through the emotional aspect and the personal aspect of it. So what happened to you? Are you happy to talk a little about what happened?
Yeah. In a nutshell, I I'm an empathetic person. I'm an empath, and lots of us are, but we're typically empaths, maybe a little bit of DNA, but also we've been nurtured into becoming empaths. So I see the world through the lens of safety. So everybody is doing stuff that keeps them safe. And if we think about empaths, they often didn't get enough love or care and attention and support when they were growing up. You know, we might have had an aloof parent, we might have an abusive parent, and we learn to people please those individuals because it keeps us
Ooh,
safe.
there's a whole podcast in this. I would add to that as well, the need to feel seen, the need to feel heard, and the need to feel loved.
Totally. And we don't get those things. So we work really hard to keep those people kind of pacified, happy, in order that they give us a modicum of some of those things. But it then encourages us and but um it undermines our self-confidence, our self-worth. We don't like conflict, and we go out into the world as being people pleasers with low boundaries. And it's our coping mechanisms are basically, if I look after everybody else, there'll be a little bit of quid pro quo, and they'll look after me.
So no standing in your own power, no speaking your truth, and no standing up for your how you feel. It's more about appeasing others to get that attention and love that you never really felt you got as a child.
Exactly. So you're basically going through a lot of your life afraid, but there's different versions of you as well, because there's the version of you with your personal relationships, which has had this bad experience. And so you're kind of anticipating, and I make the analogy of it's like driving a car by only ever looking in the rearview mirror.
Hmm.
So you're looking at your past experience saying, well, what's ahead of me is going to look the same as my past. And what we have to do is to learn to take the rearview mirror, chuck it out the window and go, to hell with that. I'm now looking at the windscreen because the future is not written. It's not written by the past, but it is written by what I do today and what I do tomorrow. So I have to break my old patterns. So this kind of split personality that we have, our personal relationships is always looking at the past and
Hmm.
going, oh, this is going to happen to me again. With our professional sense, our professional aspect of ourselves, our careers, we often have a far more positive experience. So in those circumstances, we are much braver. We are more confident, we're more self-worthy, we'll go toe to toe with people, we'll have much better boundaries. But then the split personality will be that person 9 to 5, and then will be somebody very different in a social circle or in the personal relationships.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, like, this is just stuff I've kind of become aware of. So relating that back to me, I was that person. So I came into my married relationship, and I met somebody who'd also gone through an experience of um, a broken home. Their experience was much harder because their parents were far less suited to be together. They had separated. It was a strenuous divorce. Her father had basically, abandoned the family and had been rejected by the family at a very young age. Uh, and her mother had become quite resentful of men in general. So what happened?
Really?
Yeah, surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. That
So,
that gets
but money,
projected onto all men then.
yeah, so it's projected onto all men. Money was
Mm.
an issue, security was an issue. And again, if you think of that safety filter, so what happened with my ex is she was brought up in this very insecure environment, and her coping mechanisms then reflected narcissism. So narcissism, although it's a clinical mental illness, you should almost say empathy could be classified as a clinical mental illness as well, because it's a niceness. We never do it that way, but it is. But narcissism, the
It's almost
coping
like a
mechanism.
horseshoe, I would say, Charlie. And sorry to interrupt you. If
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can imagine a horseshoe and you've got sort of empathy and narcissism on this spectrum, and then
totally.
everything kind of in between. So you're not far off in I'd say pretty much every relationship is on this spectrum of someone's more on the empathic side and someone's more on the narcissistic side. And
Mhm.
if you can ideally try and sort of meet somewhere near the middle where there's a healthy dose of neither.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's where we're all trying to get to. But yeah, so if you think about narcissism, it's just coping mechanisms. It's control, it's manipulation, and essentially this person's subconscious has kind of taken over and is protecting their kind of inner egoic self from the world outside of them, because the world outside them is dangerous as far as these people are concerned.
So they're an empath that needed to feel safe, but something happened in the childhood that potentially provoked them into becoming like the narcissistic parent or the narcissistic role model.
Yeah,
And then they kind of go into fuck you, fuck everyone else. I need to get my needs met. And that's the
but
most important thing here.
absolutely. And what's really interesting is that people can go through similar experiences and come out narcissistic or come out empathetic.
Hmm.
But it can be from the basis of the same trauma. But the outcome of what happens to them is completely different. So the narcissist's coping mechanism is all about me, take, take, take. And then you get the empath, me, my ex, the narcissist, and my coping mechanism is give, give, give. Her coping mechanism is take, take, take. But the take, take, take is never enough. So the empaths are defenseless because whatever they do is never going to be enough, which just it
It's fascinating, isn't
undermines
it? It's
that
fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, but it undermines your confidence and your self-awareness, your self-worth at a whole new level because you're now with somebody who you think is going to be, a life partner and who should be there to help and keep you safe and secure. So
But it's
that
almost as if that care was an act. Then
yeah,
the narcissistic personality, whether you want to call it a disorder or a dysfunctional thing, is another thing. But they're almost trained up to act with empathy or pretend that they care.
tend
You as the empath, that as the real victim, gets sucked in by that.
yeah, yeah,
But then they'll claim to be your victim, and it's all kind of
totally
psychological.
yeah.
So you could forgive people for not understanding what's going on.
Yeah, because what people what how they interpret alienation. It is not the way I'm describing it at all, but they interpret it as just this like battle between two people. But my experience is a really good example of what happens in so many cases. So as our relationship, me and my ex, progressed, she wanted more and more things that were linked to her sense of, these are the things that I want out of life. And because she had this need to satisfy herself, it was all about how can she satisfy that need rather than forget about anybody else.
And is it fair to say at that point she doesn't have the capacity to reflect or sit with how to make herself a better person?
Totally. So a lot of the narcissists, their blind spot is their ability to self-reflect, go inside and improve themselves. And the big problem is they don't want to revisit the original trauma that caused the narcissism in the first place. And
So
if
in
they,
their world,
Mhm.
everybody else is the problem and not
Absolutely,
them.
totally, totally. But the empath, our weakness, our Achilles heel, is the fact that we're so sensitive and we are so self-reflective. But it's also our superpower because it's the thing that's going to get us past all of our toughest experiences because we can self-reflect, we can go inside, we can change and morph and genuinely heal ourselves and then become, as you say in that horseshoe, we start moving up to the middle.
Right.
Whereas the narcissist always stays down at the bottom. They don't shift. We
I've two points I want to make to share with you. One was a book, The Four Agreements, that I came across around 2016 when, interestingly enough, my father died and then my ex-wife came to me looking for a separation.
mm,
And one of the four agreements was stop taking things personally. And I'm like, wow, this is a revelation. What he was saying, understand that a lot of what people say and what people do is about themselves.
totally,
You
totally.
actually have no business taking something personally. And to me, this was a huge step forward because I realized that I had no business taking personally certain things.
But if I can add to that,
Hmm.
it teaches you about you because in taking stuff personally, which you shouldn't, it identifies to you your own sensitivities, your own insecurities, and it's a gift because it says, that's the stuff I need to work on.
Or your
And then realize
triggers,
it,
as it's otherwise known.
sorry?
Or your triggers, as
Or
it's
your triggers, yeah, yeah. And just I always say to all the parents, make the world around you your teacher, because I agree 100% with what you and the book are saying, which is stop taking it personally, but but things that are triggering you, those are gifts to help heal you. So be aware of them and go do something about it. And then
signposts
you
almost.
won't, yeah, you won't be triggered anymore. Once you address it, you won't be triggered. You'll then still be in contact with these people, and you will be so different that whatever they say, whatever they do, doesn't affect you. Because you realize, yeah, you're just talking about you. You carry on talking about you. I'll focus on me, you focus on you. And there's actually very little going on between us.
That's enough of me talking about me. Now, what do you think of me?
And who cares what they think of you?
The other point I was going to make was I read this brilliant book called The Psychopath Test by John Ronson.
Hmm.
And I think they turned it into something for TV. And he was conducting an investigation as to who decides who or what is a psychopath. What are the, criteria?
Yeah.
And he set this out, and he concluded that I think it was either somewhere around 5% of the human population are just natural born psychopaths.
Mm.
They are born without the capacity for empathy.
Mm.
They don't care and they don't feel that compassion, but they learn to hide that because they realize that everybody else around them does.
Yeah.
So you've got a small percentage, but it is still quite large. If you say 5% of, 8 billion people, that's still a chunk.
Yeah. It's a
So
lot of people.
they tend to become the prime ministers, the presidents, the chiefs of the Fortune 500 companies, or in prison, he says.
Mm.
They're ball breakers. They'll step on people's heads to get where they're going. They
Yeah.
really don't care. And in business, that's an admired trait. So they do well in business,
Yeah.
or they commit some kind of a crime and go to prison. And so one of the things that comes out of this book is with narcissists and narcissisms, it's not necessarily that they're born with no empathy. It's that they become that way as a trauma response to, like you say, in the childhood, not getting their needs met.
Mm.
But from the outside looking in, when you study their behavior, you can't tell the difference between a narcissist and and a psychopath because they're doing the
Mm.
same things.
Very similar. Very, very similar. Yeah.
But one is born that way, clinically, no, if they come across a car crash and they see blood and guts everywhere, they'll just go, "Oh, that's interesting,"
Or they'll go and take the person's wallet. Yeah.
or they won't recoil and go, "That's a bit."
Yeah.
And so with the study of narcissism, narcissistic personalities, and narcissistic traits.
Mm.
What I've found is there's a whole actual vocabulary and language
Mm.
because I'd never heard of half of this stuff till it came into my sphere and my life. So tell us a bit more about the whole vocabulary and language of understanding a narcissist.
Well, I was going to say rather than going into all the kind of the words of it, I would
Hmm.
encourage everybody who's going through this
Do their own.
go and read up about this. Go and read up about narcissism because you suddenly realize there are all these characteristics of these individuals, and you suddenly go, "Oh my God, my ex goes tick, 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 tick." But they're really predictable people. And it's suddenly like you've been given a manual on what they're going to do to you or how they're going to behave with you. And if you combine narcissism or psychopathy, if you're unfortunate enough to be with a psychopath, um, combine that with the trauma that you're aware of that that person went through, and then you end up with this like little FBI profile of, okay, this is what this is how this person is going to um, they're going to get triggered like the same way that we get triggered. What's going to trigger them? What's going to get them upset? Because when you're going through a situation of parental alienation, the go-to response for an alienator is dial up the alienation. So I've identified 5 big triggers for the narcissists stroke psychopaths.
Mhm.
One of them is when you actually separate, because typically one of the traits of these narcissists is they normally have it in their head that the relationship has come to an end before we get there, because they're a lot less emotional and empathetic than we are. They're quite hard and driven, and especially if they're not getting what they want, they start creating foundations. And this is exactly what happened to me. That they started aligning the children with her 10 years before we separated. That's how far it was going on for 10 years. I didn't see any of it. But so separation is a point in time where the narcissists stop being pretending to be nice to you, but also you've acted as a crutch to that person
Right.
for that period because you are providing some of their you're supporting some of their needs and some of their emotional needs. So when you disappear off the scene, the gloves come off, and that's often when we see this big increase in alienation. Second one, court. Anything to do with court, because these are people who feel the need to control and to win, and they never say sorry. And you've put them in an environment where somebody else is going to be making decisions in their behalf, and it terrifies them. So guess what? They dial up the alienation again because they're feeling insecure and they want to hurt you back for their sense of you've placed them in this place of jeopardy and insecurity. Third one, money. They get their security from homes, cars, having money in the bank, being able to buy stuff, being able to buy people. You know, they're all about money. We're all about the kids. They will do things like they will encourage a child to live with them in order that they can get the child maintenance.
Hmm.
I mean, but anything to do with money, if you threaten that, they'll dial up the alienation. If you start improving your relationship with your child, they don't want that to happen. So they will increase the alienation to undermine your efforts in having that good relationship. And then the fifth big one is if you get into a relationship with somebody else, a romantic relationship. Because first of all, they don't want you to be happy. So now you're being happy. So that's really bad.
How
As
dare
far as
you?
I'm concerned, how dare you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And worse still, you might introduce a step parent or somebody else that has a good relationship with their child. So, or your collective child. So again, they'll typically vilify the person that you're with. And I see this all the time, that they often try and get the child, so they get the child to start, really disliking your new partner. They often force us to try and make a decision for the child being told, you need to decide it's me or the partner. Um, and so you have to be if you have to be really careful about your romantic interests, because again, the alienation gets dialed up. But all this stuff is entirely predictable. This is why I say it's really worthwhile people spending time, like really spending time with books and getting very familiar with narcissism, because you suddenly realize, okay, I now understand. Because as an empath, we literally cannot get our heads around the things that a narcissistic person will do to a child because they they,
Right.
they don't have that empathetic connection with the child. They're only concerned about themselves, and this is the bit that we can't understand. We
Is
know that they're
yeah.
hurting us. They know that they're hurting us, but they have this blind spot to the fact that if they're hurting us, you must be hurting the child. And this is
And
just something that,
denying and depriving the child of a parent who loves them.
and this creates psychological scarring in these
Well, it's
kids
child
for
abuse. It's
decades.
there's no two
It
ways
is,
about it.
it is psychological child abuse and other forms of psychological abuse like coercion are now, they're criminal offenses. And really, what needs to happen is that these things, this psychological abuse, needs to be made a criminal offense because it has such a massive impact on the kids, and then the kids grow up scarred and take it into their relationships and their families, and you just end up with this intergenerational mess of one generation after another having problems with their kids, causing problems for their kids.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw and recommended a podcast to one of my clients actually. I think it was Caroline Strawson. She was talking about wounds without blood and this
Mm,
kind of,
mm.
this wounding that happens, but there was no crime seen, as it were. It was all psychological and emotional. Do you remember, or did you ever come across the Caucasian chalk circle, der Kaukasische Kreidekreis by
That's easy for you to say. No.
Bertolt Brecht was the author. And in this story, in the community, they were in the Caucasus Mountains somewhere before we have the modern divisions of what's Romania, Bulgaria, Germany, and Austria, and so on. And
Yeah.
so the the there would be a judge, and there'd be two women,
Hmm.
and both women were claiming the child. And the judge would draw a chalk circle and say, well, this
Hmm.
is fairly straightforward. We put the child in the middle, and each of the women claiming to be the mother on either side. And whichever one pulls the child out of the chalk circle is obviously the mother and wins. So naturally, the real mother is horrified at the thought of her child being literally pulled apart and takes a step back and takes her hand off. And
Yeah.
the fucking nutjob mother that's prepared to hurt the child yanks the child out of the chalk circle and claims the child as their own.
Yeah.
And this was the Caucasian chalk circle. And I think
Yeah.
it in some way describes what you've alluded to in the relationship of the alienated parent and their narcissistic ex.
Yeah. And that's probably the hardest thing for us as alienated parents to do, because very often fighting for your child does have some benefits without a doubt, because you want to try and maintain the relationship as best you can, but going no contact can be really, really hard to recover from. But sometimes we have to, because it's like the chalk circle. The damage that's been done by the person who's pulling the child out is so extreme that you have to let that child go to the dark side, so to speak, in order that they have a life that is calmer and more peaceful and allows the child to have some security. Even though it's in the hands of the alienator, constantly pulling that child backwards and forwards doesn't serve the child. And that is one of the hardest things for a parent to accept, get their head around, and deal with. That actually, this is the greatest form of love you can possibly show your child. Sometimes is to give them their space.
So that brings us nicely to looking at things from the perspective of the alienated child.
Mm.
Because so far we've kind of been looking at it from the perspective of the alienated parent. So
Yeah.
as a child, you've already identified these kind of red flags to look out for in the behavior of the narcissistic alienating parent. But in the world of the child, you're not familiar with any of this psychological abuse. You just see that your parents have broken up and you've been forced to take sides, and it's maybe safer to be with the bullying energy of the more aggressive, domineering parent because the easygoing, laid back, empathic parent's going to love you unconditionally. So it's
Mm.
almost safe to push them back.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that the subtle addition I would make is,
Mhm.
if you think about it from safety again. So I'll just remind people, empaths, people pleased to keep safe, narcissists controlled to keep safe, and then you've got the alienated kid. And what they do is they're going, oh my God, I'm the kid in the chalk. I'm being pulled left and right. I'm going to get hurt here. And the ironic, this is counterintuitive. They align with the person who is pulling the hardest because they are most afraid of the consequences of not keeping that person happy, because that person is going to hurt them the most.
Sure.
And this is the crazy thing. So they go with the person
But is
that
it a conscious
most afraid
choice?
of.
Is it
Yeah.
something that they're consciously doing, or would you say
That's the $64 million question, because I don't think there's ever
their
really been
awareness?
research into alienated kids to ask them. Because even if you did ask them, I'm not sure that they could honestly answer that.
One of the things I have come to realize, and last month's podcast guest was Adele Moylan, who does the family constellations therapy. In the
Hmm.
energy of the family system,
Hmm.
it's usually the case that this bizarre triangle of alienated parent, and alienated child,
Hmm.
this doesn't come out of nowhere. Usually further back in the family system or in the ancestors, on either one side or both sides, this
Yeah.
has happened before.
Yeah. Yeah. Or a bit like, this is why I'm talking about my experience growing up and being an empath and my ex's experience being a narcissist. It's all coming from the past, and it could be intergenerational. So it was. my ex's mother's experience and how she influenced her children that created my experience of alienation.
Right.
And that's where it was coming from. And it was very likely that my ex's mother's mother or mother's parents did something similar to her to create those insecurities with her. And she repeated it in her marriage. And then she made it even worse for her kids. And then, my kids have been severely affected by this experience of being, overtly alienated. I guess they're, in fact, when I think about it, um, my wife was actually alienated from her dad as well.
Right.
So she's got this kind of example of
So you're talking about wo wounded people
yeah,
that are maybe subconsciously and then consciously wounding others, as in hurt people hurt.
absolutely. And of course, the empaths are wounded people as well.
But they're choosing not to hurt.
But we tend not to hurt other people so much, but we do unintentionally hurt people.
Sorry about that, Charlie. We had a bit of a power cut here and everything went skew whiff.
Excellent. But you've put another 50p in the meter and we're back online again.
Yeah, so looking at things from the perspective of the alienated child, and you're saying that the in adulthood, the behavior that's manifesting is reflecting the hurt child or the wounded child of the parent who's adopted these narcissistic traits.
Yeah.
It's
And
a
and
trauma response.
so children go through a range of different experiences. And again, it's like I was saying with narcissism, if once you understand what all those characteristics are, you can go, oh, okay, they can become quite predictable. Alienated kids, that there's like 18 to 20 different things. And you can literally go through a checklist. And this is what I do with parents. So, an example of that might be they're in this conflict, this loyalty conflict between that's created by the alienated parent. But this child then feels, I have to make a decision between one of two parents. There's things like cognitive dissonance. So that's a child being told two different versions of reality. So one parent saying, "Oh, this is the way the world works, and you need to look after me," and the other parent saying something completely different, and the kid can't deal with both of those. There's stuff like parentification, so being treated like a peer or an adult.
Which is what every child wants. It's like a rewarding behavior to treat them like an adult.
Yeah, but they can be shown, so they can be told a lot of information about the divorce, the separation, court, finances, but really what's going on is completely inappropriate to include the children.
Not a child's business, is it?
It's not a child's business. And then we see things like the not the parents, but the teachers at school observe behavioral changes in the children. They start saying things like, "Oh, your child is behaving very maturely." And it's not because they're behaving maturely, it's because they've stopped behaving like a kid because
Because they've stopped being a kid.
they've stopped being a kid. And so you can see, so these things are very definable, and you have to put yourself as an alienated parent, you have to put yourself into the perspective and the experience of the kid and see the world from the kid's view, from the kid's eyes. So the kid no longer sees you as being an adult to look up to. They now see you as peer to peer. So that has a
Right.
big impact on things like, creating boundaries.
Mhm.
The child will also often be told things like, don't tell the alienated parent what's going on in your life. Don't tell them what's going on in my house.
The withholding of information is a when you said before it was almost like a scripted response.
Yeah.
In almost every case, the withholding of information is used as a way of further enmeshing the child in the coercive control, this kind of web of a sort of a unit. And from the outside looking in, that school teacher or that person that doesn't know what's going on,
Hmm.
even the child psychologists, they'll mistake that enmeshed coercive control
Totally.
for a fairly solid parent-child bond.
Yes. Yeah. And they don't realize it's manipulation and coercion. And this is part of the problem because they're
Even
not
for
trained.
children in some ways.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the children themselves don't often recognize what's going on, and they will say things like, "No, this is my own independent thoughts," when they're clearly
But there will
parroting
be
the view.
clues. There will be clues. They'll look at their parent and go, "Well, hang on, she said that or he said that," and then they'll see something that goes completely against what they said. So they'll
Hmm.
start to have the occasional, "All right, well, if she said dad was this and dad was that,
Yeah,
but dad's done this and said this, so that can't be true." And there's this conflict of
this is the cognitive dissonance. Yeah,
right. So they there are clues to helping the children sort of figure out what's going on, but it's a lot easier just to go, "Oh, that didn't happen. Oh, I just brushed that under the carpet and we'll just
yeah,
carry on
and
and pretend."
that's what they do. They have like confirmation bias, so they're basically confirming the stuff that the alienating parent wants them to believe and ignoring the evidence to the contrary. So and this all ties back in with the point you were making of the four rules. Don't, as an alienated parent, don't take stuff personally, because what's going on in your kid's experience to a large degree is unrelated to
About
you.
them. Yeah,
It
it's not
doesn't
about them.
it doesn't
And
feel that way, but
as
it's
a
like,
child, we're quite narcissistic by nature because we have to
yeah,
get our needs met to survive in the world.
yeah. And also you can layer in when they're a teenager. So that
Woody's joined us now as well. It's a menagerie here, Charlie.
good, 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 good. Nature at its best. So when you look at all these things the child is doing,
Hmm.
so being rude with you is a coping mechanism. Not telling you about what's going on in their life, it's a coping mechanism. Not
Hmm.
answering your texts, coping mechanisms. All these things are coping mechanisms to keep the child safe.
Yeah.
But we as the alienated parent, if we see that, it's really easy. It's not really easy, but it's much easier for us to deal with it and continue to give the child the love and support that they actually need. But, and this comes back to your four rules, we as the parents, so if you imagine two universes, there's the universe of your kid and there's the universe of you. And most of the time, we should not be in the picture. It should only be the kid. We should just be focused on them. What do they need from me, regardless of how rude and difficult and all these other things that are going on? What do they need from me? But
So the loving parent that takes a step back out of the chalk circle and says, "Well, I'm not going to pull the child because I'm going to hurt them."
mhm,
Surely the narcissistic alienating parent that's already groomed the child to take sides
yep,
goes, "See, I told you they didn't care.
absolutely. But you can't win. This is one of the big emotions that we feel
It's
as
just
parents.
damage limitation, right?"
It's powerlessness. Yeah. But I'm talking about when you do have contact with your kids or when you're rebuilding contact. So if you do have contact with your kids, or if you're rebuilding, it's the same thing. You want to keep really focused. What do they need from me in this moment? But if they do something like they're rude or they say to you, "Oh, but dad, you're mean with money. Oh, but dad, you didn't do this or you didn't do that." If we get triggered, all of a sudden we pop up into the picture. And as soon as we're in the picture, we take our focus off the kid and it becomes all about us. And what's happening at a subtle level is your kid is trying to feel safe. That's all they want to know. Am I safe with my parent? And if you as the parent are not acting safe, you're going to push your kid away from you. And they will pick up on things like if you are critical of the alienating parent, that's going to make the
Ooh,
kid
big
feel,
trap. Yeah, it's
yeah,
like a
big trap.
trap. It's like a spider's web. It's like you might
Should,
just be describing something that actually happened or something they actually said, and
yeah,
it's like boom,
yeah.
it's
Kid,
like
kid
wow.
feels unsafe, they move away.
Yeah.
You defending yourself is the same as criticizing the alienating
How
parent.
dare you? How on earth might you wish to speak your truth?
So you can't do that. It gets subtler again. If your body language changes, if your facial expression, your the tone of your voice, if you put on a poker face, if you go silent, all of those things are telling your kid, although I'm not saying it, I'm feeling unsafe.
Mhm.
And then here's the bit that you'll like as well, because we're electromagnetic people. So our hearts are giving off these electromagnetic signals, you
Mm.
know, at, at some gargantuan distances, but really easy for most people to pick up within 12 to 15 feet. And a kid will pick it up over the telephone as well. If your electromagnetic vibration is basically sending out signals of, I'm not feeling safe, your kid will pick up on it. So even though you're faking it, the message is, I'm not safe, I'm out of here. So this gets so this is why it's really important for the alienated parent to be fundamentally healed within yourself, because until you're healed, you can't help your kid so effectively. And this is the biggest message to get across to every parent, because parents are focusing 80% of the time on the kids, if not 90% of the time on the kids, and 10 to 20% on themselves. You have to flip that. It should be 80 to 90% on you to make sure you're in a really good space in order that you can then focus entirely on them.
So we'll come back to rebuilding your life one day at a time after this narcissistic abuse.
Or
But just
during.
coming back to the experience of the alienated child, I was chatting to a lovely woman in Australia,
Mhm.
and she'd been through the whole process. So even though she was my age, she'd been that alienated child. And she said, Carl, I'm in my 50s, right? My mum is still around. She's in her 80s. She's horrible. She's a pathological liar. She's a narcissist. I see it now. I never saw it before. She drove a wedge between me and my father. I didn't see my dad from being when I was about 20 years old for 30 years. So I've lost 30 years of my life with my dad based on the lies that I believed from my mum.
Yeah.
And I'm fucking angry. She was hurt and angry and
Mhm.
upset once
Mhm.
she woke up to what her mother had done, which was basically treated her as a tool or as a weapon to get back at the father, who was just this loving guy that loved his children. And her way of getting back at him was to use the kids. And she was coming to me with there was a lot of grief and anger there that she'd
Oh
lost
yeah.
30 years with her
Yeah.
father. And you can't tell someone, oh, it's okay. They might understand what's
Mhm.
happened, but you can't take away that grief and that pain of losing 30 years with a loving father who was misrepresented by the pathological liar,
Yeah.
alienating mother, who still to this day is still not changed and exhibiting the same behaviors 50
They
years
don't
later,
change. They
only she
don't
sees
change.
it now. And it's like, how? So she's kind of beating herself up for not
Mhm.
seeing it. But then she's also having experiences, having difficulty with relationships in her own life, having
Mhm.
difficulties with addictions in her
Yeah.
own life,
Yeah.
and unable to reconcile this feeling that she has to be there for her mother because the mother made her, as the child, their emotional support.
Absolutely.
So the
This is
child,
the parentification stuff again.
right? So she's a grown woman, but
Yeah.
she's been made to outsource her own needs to come second to the
Hmm.
needs of the mother, which comes first.
Yeah.
And obviously she didn't see it until she got to a certain age, but now she's resentful. What
Mm.
would you say to alienated children to help them not become resentful and angry and full of grief at being fucking lied to and deceived?
I This is one of the harder ones for the kids, because the best answer would be go off and get some trauma therapy. But so much of the people who are like the psychologists, they're not trained up on the trauma that's associated with parental alienation. And so there's an aspect of their kind of their level of skills and understanding that doesn't meet the needs of the people who need the support.
So
Um,
what you're saying is that the trauma counseling for the alienated children
mhm.
needs to be done by people who have some experience in it, like yourself.
Ideally,
But a
and
lot of these psychologists and counselors, they've come off the 4 year course in university or college, and again, no disrespect to anyone that
no,
does
no,
that.
no disrespect to them at all.
But
It's
if
not.
they haven't the lived experience, the child probably knows more than them.
So I think the problem, which is it's affecting the lawyers, the judges, the social workers, the police, the schools, just about everybody, because parental alienation is still not recognized. It's not that there isn't awareness, education, training, and giving people the skills and the tools to deal with it. And I think it really needs to start with the psychologists, because if 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 the if the IDC and the DSM-5, for instance, recognize parental alienation, doesn't matter what they call it, but if they recognized it as a real thing with tangible signs, tangible impacts, which there are, because I mean, this is real stuff. If they recognized it, it would then go into the curriculum and people would be trained up on it and it would become a specialist subject. And in fact, there is a university in Malta that does have a module for like postgraduate people who want to study parental alienation, particularly. But that's just one university in the world.
It's a start, though.
But it is a start, but they have a
Yeah.
curriculum. But if all the people that were going through psychological training, and all the therapists and counselors and everybody else, if they understood that one of the things that was an option to study was parental alienation, that would also inform the lawyers, the judges, the social workers. So you've got a different system in Ireland to us here, but in the UK we've got something called CAFCAS, so like the Tulsa equivalent. Um, so CAFCAS has a policy on parental alienation, and in fact they just changed it and watered it down, but they haven't trained anybody. So they've got a policy saying this is how we view it, this is how we deal with it. We've got a toolkit, but it's like that's just an exercise to protect themselves. If anybody says, "Oh, what about parental alienation?" Oh, yeah, go to our website. It's a policy. But if you ask on the social
Mm.
workers, they haven't got a clue.
So
Which
there's a lot of resources, if you like, to help alienated parents and to help people identify narcissistic abuse.
because there are very few resources for alienated parents, and even narcissistic abuse, I don't think is really supported.
I want to share your website there. I don't know if you can see that for anyone that's not come across you before, Charlie.
Wonderful, thank you.
CharlieMcCready.com, and you've got your 9 step program as well as your counseling. And what you say there, you probably never heard of the term parental alienation until it happened to your child. Again, this idea that awareness is the biggest tool around this phenomenon.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems that people have is because they're so often parents come to us and they say, I didn't even know that this was a thing.
Right. How would you but then again, coming back to what we said about seeing the energy in the family system, if
Hmm.
our parents broke up when we were children and we had to go and live with one of them, it might not have been an overt case, but it was still a case that there was some separation. And so in the family system, it's already there.
Hmm.
But yeah, I guess I can only relate to it in my case. My mother broke up with my father when I was about 10, but she supported me having a relationship with my father.
Yeah.
So when I sat down with my
Good.
ex-wife and we agreed to co-parent and we agreed to cooperate, I had no doubt that that's what would happen.
Because that's the rear view mirror, because that was the model that you had in your head about what would
You
happen.
just think, yeah, we both love the
Yeah.
children. We're both there for
Yeah.
the children. And so when I was shown that the children weren't the first priority,
Mm.
it was almost a shock. Well,
It's a shock.
what
It
is
is a
that
shock.
called?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where you come in. You can help people with the phenomenon of parental alienation, what it is, and but I would still call it a form of narcissistic abuse under that
Yes.
umbrella
Yes.
and
Yeah.
becoming familiar. And I think that's more common these days. I think there's more awareness around how to handle and deal with the narcissistic abuse.
Yes, I think narcissism is coming along. Where parents might find additional problems is they often there are still people offering reunification, and there is family therapy. It doesn't work because the people who are the trained psychologists, and again, we're not saying anything disrespectful about the profession. We have great respect for the profession, but if you're not taught something, how are you supposed to help people?
Hmm.
So the psychologists, if we think about a classical reunification, that a kid comes along to be reunited with an alienated parent. Now, first up, the message to the kid is there's something wrong with me that I have to go and see a psychologist in the first place. So and especially if they're a teenager and they're feeling particularly sensitive or even a bit older, but you start off on your back foot. Then you've got the layer of the alienating parent doesn't want you to attend. So you've got all this hassle, you've got all this stress being loaded onto you about not appearing.
And
Then
the alienated child isn't aware that they're being weaponized or used as a tool by a parent that's supposed to be there to love them.
absolutely. And then they also think that the person that they're seeing, the psychologist, might report back what is said in that what should be a private environment back to the alienating parent. And then on top of that, you're in a room with somebody that you're being told you shouldn't be with. So
It's just, yeah, it's a nightmare for a child to even have to go through that.
yeah, and so before you even start, the child coming in is in completely the wrong place to start any sort of reunification process. Then you've got the parent. So the parents coming in, typically they haven't gone through the healing process that I was talking about before. So these parents are distraught. They're massively sensitive. They're triggered by everything. Their
Just for
sense
taking it
of
personal.
confidence, yeah, they're taking everything personally. Their self-confidence is an absolute low. They have no idea what to expect from the kid. And then you've got the psychologist mediating it. And the psychologists work on diagnosis. So they're kind of assessing from what they can see of the dynamics of the situation, assuming that everybody's being honest. But of course, they're not.
Without the tools to really understand what's going on.
Totally. So the kid turns up and they're going to report in their perspective,
Hmm.
which is that the alienated parent is wrong and bad and they've done all this stuff. The kids will also lie. And then rather than the psychologist being able to say, I see what's going on. You've been parentified. You've been going through cognitive dissonance. You've been splitting, all these things rather than the psychologist identifying all these things in the child and then going, right, I accept that a lot of what you're saying is just frankly not true. So let's help defend the parent without the parent having to defend themselves. Let's really mediate this so we can create a bond. They don't. They side with the kid and they say to the alienated parent, you need to explain yourself because you've done all these terrible things to your child. And of course, the alienated parent then defends themselves. And we're back to that don't defend yourself, pushes the kid away. So these sessions are just a disaster area for everybody, not the psychologists because they're being paid, but for
And
the
that is another
parent and the
thing
kid.
you see very clearly where the court system, the judges, the solicitors, and the psychologists, they're not just getting paid, they're getting paid fucking well. And
Yeah.
they're profiting from this psychological abuse, the emotional abuse. And in the case of the alienated parent, this vilification of usually someone, like you say, who's sensitive, they're empathic. What's your worst fear as a mother or a father is losing your children. And
Yeah.
this fear has been actualized and realized, and the rejection by the children you love is triggering this wounded, traumatized child of your own that you've
Hmm.
still not fully reparented. So you're talking about people profiting from someone going through a living nightmare.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is it. And so there's no point telling it any other way because this is what it is.
So I think it's helpful to have some good news as well, because the 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 bad news, as you've just articulated, the whole system doesn't understand parental alienation and is kind of frigged against you. And also you've got the alienators who are prepared to lie, and we feel very uncomfortable lying. So most of us end up in bad outcomes because of the lack of understanding, lack of education, lack of training from the social workers, the police, or not so much the police, but the lawyers and the legal system, the judges. The good news is there is way more that you can do than most people think that they can do. Because when they come into alienation, it's normally from a place of a lack of understanding, almost a point of ignorance of not knowing what they're getting
So
into.
education.
And working on your self-healing is something that most people, most alienated parents feel uncomfortable about doing because they're empaths and they want to focus on everybody else, not themselves. But this is where people like me can help, because we can help you, I can help parents to get back into a good space where they understand what's going on with their kids. They understand the coping mechanisms that their kids are employing. They understand narcissism. They understand the narcissistic abuse. They understand the things you can do to mitigate the damage that the alienator is trying to do. And you can heal yourself. And when you heal yourself and you understand what's going on in your kid's life, now you've got a fighting chance of actually reconnecting with your kid.
But the last thing you're going to do with that education and awareness is engage the courts and the solicitors and the psychologists who frankly don't understand and are there to profit from it.
Yeah,
So
they're not going to help you.
you realize that, so you step back from that because
Mm.
what, in what world do you have to fight for your children anyway?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and this is the crazy thing, because the systems that are there to protect the children are failing hand over fist, and they don't even understand that they're failing. But once this stuff starts going, once the psychologists recognize it, there'll be a sea change. Because when it's recognized as being a real thing, then there'll be funding for research. The research will really start getting into the detail, and you
Well,
have to get
it's like referees for
experience, stuff
football
like
matches,
that.
Charlie. So you can't have refs refereeing a match that they've not played. So you need
Yeah,
ex-players to become referees. So once the alienated children and the alienated parents start becoming the psychologists and the solicitors and the judges,
yeah,
that's when you'll see. And so that could be a generational thing.
yeah. I mean, I think that would help enormously. But
But
even just having the understanding, the
there's an underlying
basic
problem there.
understanding.
It seems to me that the courts and the solicitors and the judges are full of these narcissistic types that are exactly like the abusive ex that's
No,
weaponized the kid and using the kid for their own ends. And so it's almost like well, I wouldn't say it was a cesspit of poisonous narcissistic vipers, Charlie, heaven forbid. But
sounds like an accurate description.
if there's a sea change and suddenly the empaths decide to want to become solicitors and judges, then maybe that we could see change at that level. But certainly as psychologists and psychotherapists, you would expect that there could be more education And again,
Absolutely.
I want to come back to this idea of helping not just the alienated parents, but the alienated children, because they are likely then to, not because they're just unaware of what's going on, but they'll more than likely have difficulty forming healthy, wholesome relationships in their own lives.
Totally.
They'll more than likely meet an abusive person, whether their tendency is to empathy or narcissism, and the cycle repeats itself because the first thing they'll do is have children, and then they'll get divorced, and then those and in Manchester we have a phrase, shit runs down.
Yeah, yeah, and that's true. I mean, just to share some timescales with the audience listening today,
Hmm.
I had 10 years of that what I call that pre-alienation phase, which was a narcissist undermining my character as a parent,
Hmm.
and it was very subtle, but it was building up the narrative in my children's heads, such that when we got to the separation point, that it was, and parents see this a lot, there's this sudden change in the kids because the alienation ramps up, and parents are caught blindsided by this because they haven't really realized what's been going on for a long period of time, and then suddenly full alienation can begin, but it never happens. It doesn't go from zero to 100. It goes progressively 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 until you get to the 100. But we just see the 100, or we're not looking out for anything else. So I had 5 years of severe alienation with the kids, including 2 years no contact with one of my children, which I voluntarily did because I knew that I had to give her that breathing space because it was this vicious kind of pressure that was being put upon her not to see me. And
Hmm.
I thought, you've got so much going on in your life. You're a young woman. You're just trying to get through school. You're trying to get through your life. I just need to give you that space because also every time you see me, the pressure's increasing. So my relationship with you is deteriorating. So let's just stop the rot there, and we'll revisit it whenever. And I had no idea how long it was going to be before we could reconnect, but it was 2 years. And I'm now 10 years on from that. So I managed to rebuild the core part of the relationship quite quickly with both of them. But because of that scarring, that psychological scarring you're talking about, it's been 10 years and we've got another 10, maybe 20 years to go. I'll be dead before this is ever resolved
Are
fully.
those children fully aware that it was your compassion that allowed you to take a step back because of your unconditional love for them?
So this is one of the other catch-22s. The conversation your kids don't want to have, even in the future, is about the experience of alienation that they had when they were children. So the very thing that will heal them is the very thing they don't want to talk about. And when you try to talk about it, you end up pushing them away, which damages your current relationship. So, I've got like 80, 85% relationship with one kid, 70 to 80% relationship with the other kid. And that 20% is just feeling entirely comfortable, having discussed the past, let all the past traumas go. That's the bit that still hasn't
You're
been
not looking in the
fully
rearview
addressed.
mirror, you're only going forward there.
Yeah, and you have to only look forwards. And as parents, you have to learn, don't look behind you. Don't stop trying to correct the record. Because when you try to correct the record, that's just you with your stuff. It's like your kid, if they want to have a relationship with you, they want to do stuff with you in the future with, as clean a record as you can have. Just focus on where you're going, not where you've been.
So is it fair to say, as a sort of a, you know, 10 to 15-year-old, the children obviously don't have much choice. But
Mm.
when they get to say the age of around 25, anywhere between 20 and 25, we'll say there are tools out there. There's the internet, there's Charlie's website, there's
Mhm.
again Caroline Strauss and about narcissistic abuse and stuff. And so they've kind of got the tools to start to understand what they've been through and what has happened to them. But unless they're of that empathic nature where they're keen to want to be a better version of themselves, the chances are they won't want to look at it at all.
Yeah, and a lot of these kids become narcissistic
And
as a
so
coping
their
mechanism.
modus operandi is finding a partner like their alienated parents
Hmm.
that's preyed upon by their narcissistic parent, and effectively the cycle continues.
Yeah, because they don't want to be with another narcissist. They want to be with somebody who's going to give to them. And if they're another narcissist, the narcissist is take, 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 and you've got two people just taking, 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 and those relationships don't work. So empath and empath works beautifully. Narcissist and narcissist it is a disaster area.
Mhm.
Narcissist and empath tends to be a train wreck as well.
Wow. And so, again, coming back to the idea that we're spiritual beings having a
Hmm.
human experience, if we in some way chose this train wreck, as you call it, to help us become a more evolved human being or a more evolved soul through our experience in the human paradigm, does it all just become about love and learning to love ourselves as the alienated parent who's rejected and abused? We have to learn to love ourselves. We have to learn our children, even if they're being abusive towards us through no fault of their own. And then you have to learn compassion and forgiveness for your narc ex that used the kids to hurt you and abused the kids in the process.
Absolutely. This is all about, oddly, and this is the great thing because it works with kind of any religion or just a spiritual sense of, the universe or consciousness. You're learning love at a whole new level. You're learning compassion at a
And what if
whole new
that's what we're
level.
here to do? What if that's what it's all about?
Exactly, exactly. And that because it took me a long time to realize that was what was fundamentally going on with alienation. It was me being taught a whole new level of love and then helping other people to appreciate that as well. Because at the end of the day, we're only here to learn. And this is a fairly brutal way of kind of learning how to be more loving and more compassionate. But that's what it teaches you.
In the words of stand-up comic Jimmy Carr, grief is the price we pay for love.
Mm, yeah, very, very insightful. But it's so true because when you've got an alienated kid who's difficult to love, that really tests you. The narcissist, I mean, that's a real test to be able to love them again, genuinely. But also, exactly as you say, you have to learn how to love yourself as part of that process. And that gives you that inner strength, that inner freedom, that inner enjoyment of life again by loving yourself.
And that is a lot easier to say than do because I'm
Yeah.
I'm looking at it now from the perspective of one of my clients, right? And she's a beautiful, amazing lady who's been writing a book with me and
Mm,
unable to communicate with her son and her grandson. She
yeah,
describes it as grieving the living dead.
absolutely.
There's a bereavement there, but these people
Yeah.
are still alive. And it's through no fault of hers and her behavior that she doesn't get to see them or speak to them. So there's a
Yes.
sense that the writing helps bring some healing to that self-love, but the pain and the grief is still there. But the idea is to feel it, not to not feel it.
There's something you could do that might help her as well. The When you go through alienation, there's nine big emotions that you go through, and grief is one of them, guilt is another. Um, what I've discovered is that the thing that we call grief is unique to us. The thing that we call guilt is unique to us. The other things, powerless, shame, injustice, all those things, but they're all unique to us. And it's all the stuff that's sitting in the rear view mirror. And when you really dig into what is grief, it's you feeling it's insecure, unsafe, vulnerable. And when you really dig into it, it's not because you're actually missing that person. Sure, you miss that person, but it is making you feel insecure at a different at a level within you. And you have to, and it's unique to all of us. And you can, through doing inner child work and stuff like that, you can, or doing trauma therapy, go deep inside of yourself and go, okay, this grief that I'm feeling is actually me as a little kid because somebody abandoned me for 5 hours, and I thought I was never going to be found again, and that just scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Or there'll be some experience, and it creates this deep sense of insecurity within us, and we get triggered by it. And then when somebody passes, it'll have that, it's going to trigger these old experiences. And
You'll be happy to hear we had the conversation earlier this week, literally around taking that sense of grief and loss and feeling it and transmuting that and alchemizing that
beautiful.
into of service to others. So
Yeah.
we're literally turning pain into power. And I've encouraged
Beautiful.
her to set up a local community organization to help other alienated parents and other alienated children and
Excellent.
alienated grandparents, but with the tools of having been through it.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent.
And this is the capacity for us to not only learn to love ourselves in a way we never did before, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
but also to bring something of our gift to the universe in transmuting that pain and suffering and that grief of bereaving the living dead and
Mm-hmm.
turning it into something. And as I say that, my own book is looking back at me with the colors of Archangel Michael, beautifully designed by Dee, the cover, with the power of the written word, that capacity to speak and to share our truth is a hugely healing mechanism. But to go out into the world and do what you're doing is a literal example of turning pain into power and transmuting and alchemizing that grief into something positive.
Yeah. And as you exactly say, there's so much that people can do within themselves, but they just need, it's almost a responsibility we have to be shepherds for the other people that we can help, and then they become shepherds, and then they become
Pay it
shepherds.
forwards.
Yeah, and everybody we help can then help somebody else, and somebody has helped us. I think that's where, the standing on the shoulders of giants. It's just we're all just we're giving back the help that we received.
Cool. Is there anything we've forgotten or anything we've not said that we should say or anything we could say that we didn't say in relation to advice for alienated parents and advice for alienated children?
I think the key thing for it's harder for children because there's less available to them, and a lot of them are not really able to deal with the their experience until later on in their life. But for
They're
the
not ready.
they're not ready, yeah. But for the parents, I would say get a hold of the materials that are out there on alienation.
Uh-huh.
Read them, read about narcissism, do stuff that's going to help you with your own well-being, mental and emotional resilience. There's lots of um, things that you can do for your own mental health, but primarily go get help. Go get somebody like me or somebody else who understands this stuff, because reading the books and everything else will give you a basic level, but it's very generic and it doesn't have the subtleties that will help you to like fast track the process. It's a bit like somebody teaching you how to swim by giving you a book and telling you this is theoretically how you swim. So that's what all these resources will do. They'll tell you how to swim.
But it's when you're in the sea and the current is strong, that's when you learn to swim.
I'll get in the sea with you and I'll swim around with you
hmm
and I'll show you how to swim in the water. That's what I do. That's the key difference because your current is different. Where you jump in, it's going to be a completely different bit of the sea from everybody else. It's going to be unique. And you need somebody who's going to be able to show you how to navigate your particular part of the sea, your particular experience.
What ages are your children now, Charlie?
31 and 33.
Wow. And are they of that age where you think they might look at this, or are you still just looking in the front view mirror and not going there with the rear view mirror?
We've done both of them have done quite a lot of work on themselves.
Right.
Uh, we've not sought to do anything, with them and me, but as I follow their lead. So as they talk to me about the things that they've done to heal themselves, then we can have conversations about that. And occasionally I kind of try to prompt them, but without doing it in a way that they would see as me trying to correct the past. But occasionally I kind of encourage them to think about aspects of their experience, normally by referring to other people, other examples, never about me and our family experience. But get them to kind of think, oh yeah, maybe there's more going on that I can work on.
Are they in relationships themselves? And
Yeah, one's married and one is in a long-term relationship.
yeah, it's amazing to see the healing. It's like we talk about multi-generational family trauma and how shit
Mm,
runs down,
mm,
but then the healing runs down too. And when you see the effect on your grandchildren and your children of the work that you've done on yourself and for others, helping facilitate them go through the healing process for themselves,
mm.
again, it's this idea of paying it forward and making the world a better place, one numpty at a time.
Absolutely. And if you want to influence your kids, and this is probably the biggest give, this is probably another big giveaway. Don't concentrate on trying to correct the record. Be the person you want them to experience. When you are the person that you want them to experience in terms of love, compassion, your standards, your values, everything like that, you don't need to use words because you are being that person, and they pick up on that. And kids, that they're very influenced by how you behave yourself.
And that, I suppose, is very difficult for people because if you're experiencing or going through the process of having your unconditional love for your child used against you by a bitter and twisted and unhealed person, surely it's a lot easier to develop sort of feelings of hatred and bitterness and nastiness towards them and just no contact and cut them out completely and run for the hills and don't ever want to have anything to do with them ever again.
And that might be a phase of your own self-protection
A necessary part
healing.
of it.
Yeah, a necessary part of it, just to cope for that period of time until you're ready to heal for that part of you. I mean, it's much easier to heal yourself in relation to your kid than it is to relation to the narcissist generally. But if you can get there in terms of healing for the narcissist, for yourself, about your feelings towards the narcissist, then that's really positive for you because all those negative emotions, they
Hmm.
only hurt you.
They
They're not
want
hurting
they
the
want you to
narcissist.
be feeling that.
Yeah, they want you to be feeling that, but also it's not hurting them at all. It's like you're holding onto this cup of poison, drinking it, expecting them to be hurt. It's like, no, you're drinking your own poison. Stop. Stop drinking your own poison. Put the cup down.
Hmm.
Up the cup of love. Start drinking that.
So I couldn't think of a better place to leave it there than drinking from the overflowing cup of unconditional love. We
Absolutely.
might be a big pair of soft old hippies, Charlie. I don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we've come to see the world this way, and hopefully others will as well.
developing compassion for narcissistic exes might be a bit like having compassion for wasps, but it is possible.
Yeah. Wasps are beautiful creatures, even if they've stung you, when you consider they're all here for a
They
reason.
need to be loved.
They need to be loved. If they didn't have a purpose, they wouldn't be here.
So we mentioned your website. How else can people find you if they want to reach out and have a chat and look at your nine-step program?
So yeah, so just the website again, charliemccready.com.
We'll
You
pop it
can
up on the
also,
screen there again.
great. You can also find me on Facebook as Charlie McCready and also Overcoming Parental Alienation Behaviors. And you'll also find me as Charlie McCready on Facebook. Just put in Charlie McCready, it'll pop up. I'm on YouTube and I'm on Instagram and I'm on LinkedIn. So if you go to any of those, just pop my name in.
You've got this beautiful logo there, Charlie,
Yeah.
with all the different colors and stuff. Do you do your social media yourself?
Uh, well, the logo is actually different people, but I do all the posts we do. But this sort of stuff, we design it and then somebody else does it for us.
I must say, over the years, your content on social media is absolutely excellent, very well presented, and very informative. So,
Thank you.
if that's yourself, I'm super impressed. Yeah.
Well, it's me and my wife Emma. We do everything. There's no AI out there. Because sometimes people say, "Oh, well, are you just using AI?" No, AI doesn't get this stuff either. It's a good resource, but the actual experience, you have to be in there. Emma, my wife's been alienated as well, so we've done alienated parents, alienated step parents. We've covered all the bases. We do have something new that's just come up as well. It's called the Parental Alienation Sanctuary.
Is that
Uh,
on your website here? Let's have a look.
yeah, and we're launching that tomorrow. And that's going to be a new private group on Facebook.
Okay.
And we're going to be, so it'll be it's a membership service. So it's that there's a subscription to it. And we're going to put additional content in there, including regular Q&As, additional kind of deeper dive content with videos and e-guides that will help people to kind of accelerate the pace at which they go through this journey.
Brilliant. I love it. I love the sound of it. I'll see you on Facebook.
You will indeed.
Okay, fantastic. So all that remains is for me to thank you for being a guest on the MenScape podcast for September 2025. Charlie, thank you so much and God bless you.
Thank you very much as well, Carl. It's an honor to be here.